Daylen, and welcome to my studio at home here. I work for Artists for Kids in the North Vancouver School District, and I'm happy to bring you this fourth installment of AFK from home. Some art activities that we can do during this time from the comfort of our home. This week we are going to look at Anne Meredith Barry. She's an artist born in Toronto and moved to Newfoundland. She was inspired largely by the landscape and the coastline of Newfoundland, the animals around Newfoundland, and the culture there. Her artwork is quite well known for the very bold colors and whimsical, playful patterns that she used, and resided for the majority of her time there on the Avalon Peninsula, and ran a community printmaking shop named St. Michael's Print Shop. She worked both as an artist there and taught many courses to members of the community. This week in particular, this activity is going to be taking its inspiration from an artwork named Whale Song number 18. It looks at communication, which I think is timely, as many teachers and in North Vancouver will be kind of shifting some of their lessons to focus on communication in May. This artwork is looking at humpback whales and the sounds they make as they swim past the shores of Newfoundland and on their migratory routes. I think Anne has done a wonderful job of representing sound, and I would say that's the question for this lesson, is how do we draw sound? And Anne has done a wonderful job of representing the sound of these humpback animals. We see the colorful rainbow coming out of the whale's mouth, that song that will show many different emotions and feelings that the whale is communicating. And then we see the brown gold marks that I think represent the clicking sounds that whales make. And then seeing the scratchy white marks, maybe those in my mind could be the screeching sounds that whales make. So I invite you to look at this artwork and notice that it's 3 panels, and how the artwork spans those 3 panels, and look for and see the sounds that you think Anne is representing there. For our lesson this week, the supplies that we'll need are 2 to 3 sheets of paper so that we can create a paneled artwork similar to Anne, a pencil, and then coloring materials. I'm choosing to use oil pastels, but please use whatever you have at home, be it felts, crayons, paint, or a different type of pastel. Optional component to this lesson will be using a glue stick if you choose to collage some things in, and you'll see that in the lesson. So step 1 of our project is to do a little research. So I think we all need to choose an animal and pause this video and then go and do a little research about that animal. And that could be watching videos and looking at pictures, reading a little bit about that animal, but really finding out the sounds that the animal make is going to be very important. And then we're going to work on brainstorming how we can draw those sounds. So I've chosen the gray wolf, and I'll tell a little bit of a story of why I chose a wolf, and how I brainstormed that. But I'd like you to pause and do a little bit of research, choose your animal, and then continue on. As I mentioned, the wolf I've had some interesting experiences in my life. As a child, I saw a movie and had a lot of nightmares and was very scared of wolves for many years. As an adult, I've done a fair amount of hiking and exploring in the wilderness and had a couple encounters with wolves that have left quite a magical experience for me in my life. A really profound sense of calm in those experiences. So it's changed throughout my life, and that's why I chose to use the wolf as my animal for this project. So going back to our question of how do we draw sound, I was thinking of the gray wolf here, and I think one of the things that in my research that I was doing was listening to the howl of a wolf, and I kind of had, similar to Anne Meredith Barry's song from the whale, but this sound that gets bigger and softer at the same time, and little circular kind of lines to try and draw that. I wrote down some words to remind myself. I said intense and fading, cool and chilling colors, and circular motions. I had some little spirally type marks that I started doodling with, and this was to, I think, represent the slow stalking or hunting that wolves do. I had these kind of loose, scribbly circles, the sound of them running. So one of my experiences was hearing a pack of wolves run through the woods just a few hundred meters away, and all you could hear were these soft sounds of their padded feet. So I was hoping to use soft colors, maybe some pastel colors for those. I have a squiggly line up here for the growl, an intense or aggressive color, so maybe a red or something. And maybe I'm going to tear that out of a different piece of paper and collage it in like a speech bubble from a comic or something like that. And then I had these little lines that seem to jump all over the place, and hopefully I'm going to be able to represent the playful wrestling and fun and bouncing kind of sounds that wolves make when they wrestle. So that's the research I did. I watched some videos, National Geographic videos, and looked for some pictures. I also, as I was doing my research, I chose to practice drawing a picture of a wolf here. And so I've done a rough drawing of a wolf before I get started. I'm using a technique which is optional, where I've traced here the wolf that I liked, the pose that I found. And then if I flip this sheet over that is semi-see-through and I scribble over the back quickly, where my lines are, I should say that, scribble over the back where my lines are. I can then place this on my sheet of paper and trace those lines again, and it'll give me a rough outline of my drawing. So I don't always have to recreate the same drawing. If I've done some practicing and I get an image that I quite like, I can recreate that. So you could use a sheet of tracing paper for something like that. So as I mentioned, we're going to use 2 to 3 sheets of paper to create an artwork that spans 2 or 3 panels. So you choose if your artwork will span 2 or 3 panels. I now have my wolf on here. I can outline that in a darker format so I can see. I've chosen to use oil pastels, so my drawing can be a little looser. It's pretty hard to get oil pastels to do very super detailed work. I hope this kind of looks like a wolf. And so I'm putting my wolf in a landscape similar as Anne Meredith Barry did, and now I want to choose my sounds to illustrate. So the first sound I'm going to do is that howl that I mentioned, and I want this to be flowing and really give that sound that it just carries through the air, maybe bounces around the valley and slowly dissipates into the air. So I'm going to put these circular marks in. I'm going to go lighter and lighter with those marks as I go. The other symbols that I'd used in my research were those little spiral like movements. So I'm going to repeat a couple of those maybe in the ground here. and the sound of running. So that doesn't necessarily have to be just on the ground. That could be somewhere floating in your picture. Anne Meredith Barry's work was floating in the sea. For me, these loose marks that represent the soft paws in the woods, I'm going to place over there. And then the playful jumping around, maybe I'll have that overlap a little bit right in the center here, where I'll have some of those bouncy lines. They may overlap the howl and jump from the ground up into the sky. And then lastly, my growl, I'm going to leave to last because I want to collage that in to give it a little bit of emphasis. So I'm going to start coloring this. I'll pause now and get a little work done and then start up again. Looking back at Anne Meredith Barry's Whale Song 18, I quite like the strong contrast that she's created with the rich darks and the bright colors and mark making. So I'm going to start coloring in my composition here of my wolf and its sounds. I'm going to start with a gray in the wolf. I'm using oil pastels again, but use what you have. And I'm going to try and do this carefully, but also think about the mark making. So the way that I'm using the oil pastel, the direction, so it maybe mimics the fur of the wolf. To finish off the wolf, I'm going to use some white and some black, maybe some cool blue, to just add a little bit more color variation and interest, to try and also mimic that fur. So again, I'm thinking about the direction that I'm moving the pastel. And I'm gonna then make specific color choices as we mentioned. So I'm gonna use some soft pale greens for the footprints and some cool blues and purples for the hunting or stalking motions. And then probably some cool colors for there and some brighter playful colors for the bouncing around and playful sounds that the wolf makes. I'm gonna go ahead and color mine in. As I finish off my drawing here, I've taken a similar approach as Anne Meredith Barry and created a largely dark background. I've used black, purple, and gray to give this kind of night sky effect, and I'm working the oil pastels quite hard. Take your time. I know this video is just a few minutes, but this has taken me quite some time, so take your time. It seems to be something that we have a lot of these days. I really enjoy doing these little videos as it gives me an opportunity to look at stories from my life and share them. And again, I was really scared, had lots of nightmares about wolves, and as an adult have had the extreme pleasure of standing fairly close to them and just being amazed by what amazing creatures they are. So I hope Anne Meredith Barry's art's been interesting to you, and you can again think about how you can draw sound and the colors, how color can represent sound, and the way you make the mark. Lastly, I've got my growls that I want to add in a collage format, and my colleagues and I encourage you to share your art using AFK at home. We'll put some of that information at the end of the video here. And I want to thank you all for joining in, listening to my story, and hopefully sharing some of your own stories. One little thing I learned in my research, as I'm always kind of learning, is that every wolf's howl is slightly different, and And similar to our fingerprints, how each wolf has a very unique howl, and that's one of the ways that they can be told apart. Each one is different. No two howls are the same. So that's one little fact that I guess I learned in this process of doing this project with you. Thank you again, and please join in the Thursdays to come.